So, hi everyone. Today I thought I would use some of the footage that I filmed for my Patreon for this lovely horse tutorial and kind of combine it into a bit of a time lapse and just give you a couple of my tips I would give and a few different techniques I would do for these certain areas. Speaking of my Patreon, I just started one which is absolutely amazing. It is currently £3 a month or £5 a month, and this tutorial is a complete real-time tutorial. I think it's nearly 7 hours of footage, so it's quite long, but I go super in depth with absolutely everything. So yeah, I would absolutely love if you could go and check it out. That would be amazing. So this certain tutorial is going to be focusing on the leather. It is the first thing I started in the actual tutorial on Patreon. And yeah, let's just get right into it. Okay, so my first tip when drawing leather work especially is to keep your leather as straight as possible. So I find it very, very easy to kind of go out of your lines. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing at all. Sometimes you can't 100% stick to your reference on your paper, like your traced image. But I find that sometimes you can so easily go over the lines of where your leather is supposed to be. And even if it's just a mistake, like you make a little bump and then you have to kind of compensate everywhere else, then the leather will get thicker and thicker, and then you're in a bit of a problem because it just looks all a bit odd. So I would try and stay away from any really obvious curves. Just really take your time and focus on where the direction is and how thick the leather's actually supposed to be, different lines in the leather and everything like that. Myself in this tutorial did the exact thing of accidentally making it a bit wider, and I did have to compensate for that. Luckily it wasn't too bad, but I'm not saying it's a thing to, it's a really awful thing to do, but it will definitely just help make your whole, drawing a little bit more realistic if everything's in proportion. So the next tip I have is colours. So obviously if you have black leather, then you probably are going to want to put black and grey into it, as you do. However, in this actual tutorial, I used a really, really lovely colour from the Derwent Lightfast called Merlot, and I used it throughout all the leather, so it all tied into each other. And the Merlot is like a really, kind of like a deep red, more on the red side than purple, but it's definitely like a purpley red colour. And I just thought this worked so wonderfully, especially in the final piece. Rather than just having that really apparent black and grey, just have a little hint of deep purple in, because I actually, for the actual tutorial, I wanted to include a lot of deep reds and purples, so to include that in the leather as well, I think was a really nice touch. And it wasn't just Merlot, I used ivory, I used, as you can see at the very top, different blues and purples, like light blues. I'll get into that in a second though. So yeah, loads of different colours. Obviously, I did kind of enhance a few colours to what the reference photo actually had, but I think that was quite a good idea in the end. You don't 100% have to stick to your reference either, it's not like a law or anything. But yeah, it just gives it a bit of added interest, rather than just having black and grey and white. So my third tip is use your paper to your advantage. Now I purely use a paper called Pastelmat by Clairefontaine, and as the name suggests, it is for pastel. Well, it's made really for pastels, but coloured pencil goes on it a charm as well. And because the paper is for pastel, it is really, really toothy. It has got a lot of tooth to it. So yeah, what I did was to give the leather a bit of texture. I didn't fill all of the tooth. So you can do a thing in art called burnishing, and where that is pressing really hard onto your paper to literally eliminate any tooth. Normally it might make your pencils go quite shiny, and I try and avoid that at all costs when I draw. So I don't burnish, so I try and avoid all of that, but to give the, as I said, to give the leather some texture, I did leave a little bit of the tooth. And I think that worked really well in the end. I think it just, you know, made it look a little bit more realistic rather than having the whole thing as like one flat, smooth bit of leather. Alright, so tip number 4 is details. So in this certain reference, the leather noseband had some stitching in it. And I did think about whether or not I was going to add this, but in the end I decided I was going to, and I'm really glad I did. Now the reason I did this wasn't so much because it was a detail, it was more because it created some really lovely contrast within the noseband. It made some really nice highlights within all the black. And I thought that would just really elevate the drawing, and so I added it. So this isn't limited to just the stitching. There can be other things like how the leather band curves around the nose, as you can see at the top. I really tried to mimic like that curve, which did help with that massive blue highlight. But just, you know, kind of checking where the curves are, where the highlights are, because obviously if you want to make it shiny, then getting all your highlights in the right places and the right value of highlight as well, whether they're like really bright or not too bright. And reflections. So as I said, there's that lovely blue bit on the very top, and this was obviously because something blue was reflecting in the actual real life when the photo was taken. So just keeping an eye on everything like that. And just how it works, really, just right in front of you. Just look at really carefully how it bends, how, you know, the leather's just made, I suppose. So yeah, details, they can be pretty good sometimes. Although saying that, a misconception is that to make amazing art, it has to have loads and loads of detail, which I don't think is really that much true. I think that there's certain other things you can bring into your artwork that will really, you know, just make it look realistic. It doesn't have to include every single little detail. And in the Patreon tutorial, I actually go into that on the nose area, where I didn't draw in every single little hair possible, because that would have taken me absolutely hours. And then my 5th and final tip doesn't exactly apply to every like leather that you can draw, but this particular reference had absolutely beautiful shadows. I think the horse was in sunlight, so obviously anything that casted a shadow casted quite a bold shadow, and adding that, I think, just made the whole portrait just look really lovely. So I made sure to use the absolutely blackest black I owned, which at the moment is the Caran d'Ache Luminance in black. I know there's other blacks out there, I just don't have them. But I made sure to use that right under the leather, and you know, it's not even like that much detail, it's just a shadow, you know, you block it in just completely black, but it just really brings out the leather against the fur. And I don't know, I just thought it was quite a cool tip to include. Obviously you have to watch out the size of the shadow, because to the side that I'm drawing the really big shadow on the other side there was barely any shadow. So, you know, just make sure you're looking at what you're drawing. Alright, so there was 5 quite short tips on just what I watch out for when I'm drawing leather, things that I, you know, take into consideration, and everything that will just kind of elevate my drawing and make it look that little bit more realistic. So as I said at the beginning, this is going to be up on my Patreon as a 4-part real-time, really in-depth focused tutorial. If you could check it out, I'd absolutely love if you could. And if you could consider supporting me in my business, I would appreciate that more than you could ever know. So there's going to be 3 more videos alongside this one going up on my YouTube as well, focusing on metal, focusing on horse hair, and then a horse's nose as well. And if you like what you see, please like and subscribe, and you know, the notification bell and everything, so you're notified every time that I upload a new video. I hope you have an absolutely lovely day, whatever you're up to, and I'll speak to you all soon. Goodbye.